Welcome. If you already know the rules of chess and how the pieces move, but you're not entirely certain what to do next, then this video might be for you. I made it with my children in mind, but I would like to think that any beginner can get something out of this. A lot of us, when we first began playing chess, we just moved our pieces randomly or copied the opponent's moves and eventually began to figure things out. But I think you could get a jump start by learning what's called opening principles. There are a set of well-developed, long-studied ideas or guidelines that help us get out of the gate, and I want to talk about those today. And if you're like me and you can't truly learn something without asking, but why, I am going to try to explain the reasons for each of these principles. And they are, the four main ones to me are these. Keeping the center in mind so you can occupy and or control the center. Developing pieces, bringing the pieces out, getting the king to safety, and connecting the rooks. I am going to put that same list over on the side so we can keep it in mind. The center squares are these four squares, and to some degree these squares are important as well. I will call these center adjacent squares. They're not quite the center, but they're close. These four squares are the center, and this is why very often you will see the first moves that each player will make are these central pawn moves. This pawn occupies one center square and it controls one center square, and the same is true for the opponent. Another possibility is to move the other pawn. It occupies a central square and controls one. And the third most common opening for white is to move this knight here. It doesn't quite occupy a center square, but it does control two of them. And the same would be true if the opponent were to move a knight. It doesn't occupy a center square, but it does control two of them. Now, the but why is a little hard to tell early in chess development, but eventually we learn that the player who succeeds best at controlling these four squares usually, not always, but usually has greater success later in the game. One of the reasons is that once these central pawns get cleared out, by which I mean they get captured or traded later in the game, then we have our pieces ready to take those spaces, and our pieces are much stronger in the center. They do nothing back here. Only the knights can even get out until we move pawns out of the way, but none of these pieces are effective on the back rank, trapped behind these pawns, crowded beside each other. But a piece placed in the center is much more powerful. For example, a bishop here controls or points at many more squares than it does sitting back on the back rank. Now the second one is to develop pieces. The why for that is the same thing I just said. The pieces do nothing sitting on the back. So we want to start getting pieces out. We want to start with our minor pieces, almost always, our knights and our bishops. Because, well, for example, our knights can immediately point at center squares, controlling them, making threats, in this case, threatening that pawn, which is why the opponent responded with this knight. We want to get out another piece. And again, this is because the pieces do nothing sitting on the back rank. Out here, they can actually start making threats, start causing things to happen, or forcing the opponent to respond in a certain way. Getting the king to safety is a very important thing as well. That is why, very early, you will often see players castling. This king, while not 100% safe, is relatively safe behind this row of pawns. If it were 100% safe, every chess game would just be both players castling as soon as possible, and then it would be a draw. But it's safer here than it was sitting on its original square. It has a knight sitting out front, which is guarding some of the inroads for the opponent. This knight is also guarding this pawn in front of the king. Castling also has the effect of activating this rook. This rook used to be trapped in the corner, but now it's ready to get into the game. So the but why is because your king is the most important piece. You want to get the king safe. Connecting the rooks is next. You will very often see players trying to get all their pieces out of the way of their rooks. Rooks are useless trapped in the corner, even though they're technically valued at 5 points. They're valued at 0 points if they're trapped by other pieces or pawns, whatever, and they can't move in the corners. But once we get the other pieces out of the way, for example, let's say we were to do this in order to move this bishop, and then we do that. Now, our rooks have places to go. They can move back and forth, and the queen will get out of the way soon enough, and the rooks can enter the action. These central pawns very often will get traded, captured, get into tight little battles in the center, and once they're gone, it's very nice to have rooks sitting right here behind them, which then can have lots of running room on these open files. So just to review, we want to occupy, if possible, or in some way control the center with pieces and with pawns. We want to get our pieces out where they can actually do things and control more space. We want to get our king to safety, because without our king being safe, we're going to end up losing. And we want to connect the rooks, because the rooks don't do anything trapped in the corner. There are a few additional principles that relate to the opening that are worth mentioning in a video like this, so I'll just hit them really quick. And again, just like the original 4 principles, these are not rules. There are going to be exceptions. But in general, don't bring your queen out too early. The queen is the most powerful, valuable piece on the board. If we bring the queen out too early, let's just show an example here. I have seen this even in games close to my level where the queen comes out on move 2. The problem with this is, yes, it's making a threat of capturing this pawn and saying check, but that's easily guarded, which this very well might have been black's second move anyway. What else can our queen do? Well, our queen is pointing at this pawn, so let's bring the bishop out, and now we're threatening checkmate on the very next move, right? But the opponent can just block that path and threaten our queen with a pawn. So we need to move our queen, right? But now the opponent can get their knight out, which they were going to do anyway, and that knight's threatening our queen. Okay. Let's move the queen again to keep her safe. Let's go here. Well, now the opponent can move this pawn, which is a good idea. It protects this. But now they're threatening our queen again. We're starting to run out of squares to put this lady. Let's go here. Well, they were going to move this bishop anyway, getting ready to castle. And now all they have to do is make a knight move, and our queen's in danger again. And they've got 3 pieces out, and all we've done is moved our queen around the board. So not a good idea to bring the queen out too early. She will be helpful soon enough. Save her for later. One of the other additional opening principles is 1 move per piece. Again, not always the case. There are common openings in which the same piece moves multiple times. But as a general rule, you don't want to move the same piece twice, say in the first 10 moves. Move that piece out to the square where you want that piece to be. Pieces, not pawns, is a general idea. It is basically saying that if you just start making a lot of pawn moves while the opponent is developing pieces, they're already threatening this, so we have to protect it. Let's protect it with a pawn move. And they get out a piece, and we make another pawn move. They want to get out another piece. They have 3 pieces out now. Let's make another pawn move. They can make this to get this piece out. We make another pawn move, and now they have 4 pieces developed. They're ready to castle, and we have all our pieces still on the back rank. It doesn't look that different right now because nobody's attacked anybody yet, but their pieces are much more powerful than ours because they can travel and control so much more space than ours can. And their pieces can hop right through these pawns that we've moved out. This knight not so easily, but it can. It might have to reroute a little bit to get in there. But the point is, we're moving these pieces out, and if our opponent knows what they're doing, which you will eventually run into opponents that know what they're doing, you will want your pieces off the back rank rather than being back here, being sitting ducks. No blocking. This one's fairly easy to explain. If our second move is, for example, this. Well, this knight got out. We're developing a piece, right? But now this bishop is trapped. This bishop wanted to go out on this diagonal, but we put a knight in front of it. So we should put the knight here, where it not only controls some central space, but it still allows our bishop to get out. But what if on let's see, our next move, we put the bishop here? Well, this bishop has blocked this pawn from moving forward. And this pawn moving forward is how this bishop was going to get out. So we've blocked again. So as we develop our pieces, we try to develop them to places where they won't be blocking the thing that we would want to move next, like this pawn, to get this bishop out. In general, I left that on the middle of the screen, so let me back up just just a second. I was talking about if we move this bishop here, for example, we've blocked this pawn, which now blocks this bishop, because normally that's how that bishop gets out, is by moving that pawn. So it would have been better to move this piece here, so now that pawn can move, and this bishop can get out to someplace. Okay, bring the chart back. Develop with threats. This is one idea of the Ruy Lopez, which this developing move immediately threatens a piece, which makes the opponent have to react to that. This may not be the best example, but when possible, when developing our pieces, we try to threaten an opponent's piece. That's one reason for this move, is because this knight immediately threatens this pawn and makes the opponent have to respond to that. They have to protect that in some way, or they lose a pawn on move 3. Again, I left the chart up. Okay, wow. I'm not going to re-record this entire video, but the idea is, if possible, develop where you can threaten another piece, or as the case with the Ruy Lopez here, we're immediately making a threat. Not always the best idea, especially if we put our own pieces in danger, if we overextend, but it's something to think about. If we can develop while also forcing the opponent to do something, it can be a good idea. And no autopilot. I run into this a lot. I forget to watch what my opponent is doing, and I'm just making the moves that I would want to make anyway, and I end up getting in trouble. So it's important to watch what the other player is doing. So if I've done this, and they've done this, and I do this, now if they had in mind that their next move was going to be to put this bishop here, it's just going to get taken. So if they weren't paying attention to what my move was, and they just put their bishop there, I've just won a bishop and open a central file. So it's important to watch. This wouldn't have been the best move for me, but if I notice my opponent's not really paying attention and they're just thinking, how can I get my pieces out? And they do this, even if I don't take the bishop, I can just take a central pawn, and but I should take the bishop. The idea is you have to watch. They might not be playing a standard opening. They might not be doing the right thing. You want to watch. They might just put a piece on the second move. I had an opponent do this, or I could just take it. So I had to watch. If I wasn't really paying attention and I just played, I missed a free piece, a free pawn anyway. So don't go on autopilot. So just a very quick review. Occupy and control the center, because it's going to be better in the long run if you do. Bring out your pieces, because they can't do anything on their home squares, or almost nothing. Get the king to safety, because if your king's not safe, your game's going to fall apart pretty quick. Connect the rooks, because rooks are much stronger once they have running room and when they can protect each other. And if possible, delay the queen. Keep the queen back until it's really a good time to bring her out. When possible, only move each piece one time during the opening. They'll get plenty of chances to move again. Pieces, not pawns. The pieces, in the end, are much more powerful than pawns. They can go more places, do more things. Get your pieces out, and only bring out just enough pawns to establish central control or to protect each other or pieces. Try not to block your own development, as we saw in the examples. And if possible, develop with threats. As you're bringing a piece out, use it to capture or threaten to capture an opponent's piece. And don't go on autopilot with your opening once you've learned a fairly standard or solid opening. Always watch the opponent's moves. They might be making a mistake, as in the case shown on the board, where you can just take a piece, or a pawn, as the case may be. Or they might do something to threaten you, as in the case here. If you're not really paying attention, you're going to lose a piece or a pawn. So hopefully that will help. I think it's helped me to kind of pay attention to these ideas, especially when an opponent plays a non-standard opening. At my stage in development, we have memorized many opening moves, but you still have to watch what the other player's doing. And if they throw you out of your memorized opening, then you have to know these opening principles. So, and good luck to all of you. Thank you for watching.